Why are you poor? They say it's because you didn't try hard enough. You didn't hustle, you didn't want it badly enough. But what if that's the greatest lie ever told? There's a man working 3 jobs, still choosing between rent and medicine. There's a mother skipping meals so her children can eat. There's a college graduate drowning in debt, delivering food to people in luxury apartments. Are these failures of effort, or signs of something far more deliberate? From the moment we're born, we're told a story, that the playing field is level, that success is out there, waiting for anyone who dares to reach for it. But that story never mentions who owns the field, or who built the walls around it. Poverty, they say, is accidental, an unfortunate side effect of an otherwise free economy. But accidents don't repeat themselves this precisely. They don't follow the same streets, the same skin tones, the same last names, generation after generation. This isn't chaos. It's a blueprint, a system that needs a permanent underclass. Because someone has to take the night shifts, someone has to clean the bathrooms, someone has to carry the weight so others can float. And to keep that system intact, they built a second machine, a machine of shame. We're taught to blame ourselves for not succeeding in a game that was never meant to be fair. We're told our suffering is personal, not political, private, not systemic. But here's the truth. If poverty were truly accidental, it would be rare. It wouldn't affect half the population in the richest nations on Earth. The working class is exhausted. The poor are criminalized, and the rich, they're glorified. You were not born into poverty by chance. You were placed into it by design, a design that requires you to believe it's your fault. Because once you stop believing that, once you see the structure behind the suffering, you start asking dangerous questions. Questions like, who profits from my pain? Who benefits from my exhaustion? And what happens if I stop playing by their rules? What if poverty isn't a glitch in the system, but the system itself? Imagine a city, not one of concrete and glass, but one built from power and profit. At its center stand golden towers, owned by the few, guarded by laws, and fed by the labor of the many. But beneath those towers, there are tunnels, deep, invisible tunnels. That's where the poor live, not by mistake, but by design. Every society creates what it needs to survive. Feudalism needed serfs, slavery needed bodies, and capitalism, it needs the working poor, not just to survive, to function. It's a cruel symmetry. Your hunger fuels their abundance. Your debt sustains their investments. Your silence keeps the machine running. And when you try to climb, you're met with obstacles disguised as choices. Minimum wage jobs that barely cover food. College degrees that lead to endless loans. Housing prices that rise faster than hope. This isn't broken policy, it's strategic poverty. Because poverty is more than a condition. It's a resource. A resource the system extracts from you daily. Your time for cheap labor. Your fear to keep wages low. Your exhaustion to stop rebellion before it starts. And to preserve this architecture, the system builds illusions. A lottery ticket dream. A rags to riches myth. A success story here and there to keep everyone else running in circles. But look closer. For every billionaire idolized, there are 1,000 workers hidden in the shadow of their wealth. Behind the polished brand lies a warehouse with no windows. Behind every success story, a quiet mass of people who did the same thing, but sank instead of rising. That's not randomness. That's how the blueprint works. The poor are not meant to escape. They're meant to function, to serve, to consume, and when no longer useful, to disappear. And if you dare to question this architecture, you'll be called lazy, ungrateful, a class warrior. But here's the truth. You didn't fail the system. The system was built to succeed by making you fail. So ask yourself, if poverty is this widespread, this predictable, and this profitable for those at the top, can we still call it an accident? Or must we finally admit the obvious? This is what it was always meant to be. Have you ever wondered where wealth really comes from? Not just money, but luxury, ease, freedom. It's not conjured out of thin air. It's extracted from people, There's a myth they whisper in boardrooms and broadcast on screens, that the rich are rich because they're smarter, bolder, more visionary. But behind every fortune is a workforce. Men and women waking before sunrise, aching by sundown. Bodies traded for hours, hours traded for wages. Wages that never quite catch up with the cost of living. This is not a partnership. It's a transaction built on imbalance. Karl Marx called it what it is: exploitation. The worker becomes all the poorer the more wealth he produces. And in that sentence lives the cruel genius of capitalism. Because the more you work, the more you create. But what you create doesn't belong to you. You might build the house, you'll never live in it. You might cook the food, you'll never taste it. You might assemble the product, but can't afford to own it. That's surplus value, the hidden engine of the system. You generate it, they accumulate it, and the system has no off switch. It only knows how to grow by draining more. Time off becomes a luxury, rest becomes rebellion, and mental health, collateral damage. Meanwhile, the ruling class profits not just from what you do, but from how little you ask for in return. Low wages, long hours, few rights. This isn't just neglect, it's design. Because if you demanded more money, more dignity, more time, their profits would shrink, and they would rather cut you loose than cut their margins. The machinery doesn't care who it consumes, only that it keeps running. And it runs on your silence, your obedience, your belief that this is just how it is. But what if the whole machine is built on a lie? What if wealth isn't earned but extracted? What if your suffering is not a side effect, but the source? What if every hour you give, every drop of energy you spend, is fueling a world that gives nothing back? In that moment, when you begin to see the theft behind the paycheck, you don't just awaken, you become dangerous. Because then, you're not just a worker, you're a witness. And no machine survives once the gears begin to resist. If the system is so brutal, why don't more people resist it? Because before it exploits your labor, it colonizes your mind. Long before you clock in, the system has already shaped how you see yourself, what you think is possible, what you think you deserve. This is the true genius of capitalism. Not just the extraction of value, but the manufacture of consent. Consent to work yourself sick. Consent to believe that poverty is your fault. Consent to admire the wealthy while you starve. From childhood, the story begins. Work hard, stay in school, keep your head down, and one day, you'll make it. But what they don't say is, most people never make it. Not because they're lazy, but because the ladder was never built for climbing. So instead, they build illusions. The TV tells you that rich people are just like you, just luckier. The movies show rags to riches tales wrapped in soft music and happy endings. The influencers post luxury as if it's a mindset, not a byproduct of inherited wealth and invisible labor. And the news? It tells you to blame the poor, welfare cheats, immigrants, minimum wage workers, anyone but the billionaires. This is ideology, what Marx called false consciousness. Not just lies, but truths rearranged to protect the powerful. You're not supposed to see the chains. You're supposed to call them freedom. You're told your boss gave you a job, as if survival is a gift, as if you didn't build the profit that pays their mortgage. You're told to be grateful, grateful to suffer, grateful to survive on scraps, grateful not to be starving yet. And if you complain, you're bitter. If you organize, you're a threat. If you dream of more, you're entitled. This is how control is maintained. Not just through fear, but through stories, through myths repeated so often they become invisible. Like the myth of meritocracy, the idea that effort equals success. But if that were true, wouldn't teachers be billionaires? Wouldn't nurses live in mansions? The truth is this: the system doesn't need you to be rich. It just needs you to believe you might be one day. So you'll keep working, keep consuming, keep obeying, because as long as you believe the game is fair, you won't question the rules. You won't look up. You'll blame yourself or your neighbor instead of the ones who built the game to begin with. And that's how the machine stays quiet. Not with violence, with narrative. But what happens when the story stops working? What happens when people start waking up, not to hope, but to rage? Are we really free, or just free enough to feel like we are? In the modern world, freedom is everywhere, on billboards and songs etched into the myths of nations. Freedom of choice, freedom to work, freedom to buy. But look deeper. Most choices are illusions. The brands are different, but the factory is the same. The job titles vary, but the exploitation doesn't. We're told we're free because we can choose between 31 flavors, while we can't afford rent. We're told we're free because we can vote, but never on who owns the land, who controls the wealth, who decides what a life is worth. This isn't freedom, it's containment. A glass cage, shaped like a shopping mall, a gilded treadmill where you run faster, only to stay in place. And just like that, capitalism completes its magic trick. It turns survival into a privilege, and turns the enslaved into defenders of the system that drains them. You can feel it, can't you? That quiet panic, the constant pressure to produce, to prove, to perform. And when you burn out, they call it personal failure, as if the cage isn't real, as if you chose this. But what if the real crime isn't failing to win, but believing this was ever a game? We are sold the myth of freedom to distract us from the reality of control, because no one rebels if they think they're free. But true freedom isn't choosing which master to serve. It's not fighting for a raise in a system that shouldn't exist. It's not surviving, it's living. And that kind of freedom, freedom from exploitation, from alienation, from false choices, will never be given. It must be taken. Marx wrote, "The free development of each is the condition for the free development of all." But that future will never come from the top down. It begins here, with clarity, with courage, with refusal. Refusal to believe their stories, refusal to blame yourself, refusal to stay quiet. Because once you see the system for what it is, you can't unsee it. You can't go back. And maybe that's the beginning, not of despair, but of something new. A spark. So now ask yourself, how many of your struggles were really your fault? How many of your fears were manufactured? How much of your life has been spent surviving a system that was never built to let you live freely? If you felt tired, ashamed, or broken, maybe the problem wasn't you. Maybe it was the blueprint you were forced to live inside. But awareness is the first rupture in the wall. And once a crack forms, light starts to leak through. If this video helped you see the system more clearly, don't let the insight die in silence. Share it, talk about it, let it breathe in the minds of others who are still blaming themselves. And remember, the ruling ideas of every age have ever been the ideas of its ruling class. Karl Marx. Until we tear down the lies, we will keep mistaking cages for choices. Subscribe, reflect, stay awake. There's more to uncover in the next video.